And now we are pleased to be joined by the founder of the National Book Festival and former First Lady, Laura Bush. It was September 8th, 2001, that the first National Book Festival was held on the Capitol grounds. It was founded by Laura Bush. It has now grown so large they have to hold it in the National Mall with all sorts of tents.
That's
Bush.
Right. It's such a thrill, and I'm thrilled to see so many people who've come out already for the very first reading. We can hear Gordon Wood reading behind us from the History Tent. I'm just very, very happy to see how many people love the National Book Festival.
Well, we continue to hear about the demise of the publishing industry and demise of books in general, but then you hold a book festival like this, it's in its 10th year.
And 100,000 people show up. It's really great.
But the Texas Book Festival as well,
it's
another,
huge too,
which is one you founded as well. I mean, what does that say to you about the state of reading?
I think people do love to read, for sure. I mean, now I think part of the demise of the publishing industry, which I don't really think is a demise, I think they're going to figure out a way to be around it, but is that now you can get all those books on your Kindle or your iPad or electronically. And so rather than buying the hard copy of a book, a lot of people are just downloading them, because the good news is you can do that in 35 seconds. So just as soon as someone recommends a book to you, you can rush home and download it on your iPad. And I think because of that, people will continue to read. I think they'll still continue to buy hardbacks, to buy hard copies of books, because they'll want to have them for their collections. And there are certain books, like our beautiful children's books, so many beautiful children's books that we're so fortunate in America to have, people will want to look at, because the illustrations are so lovely in a book and so much fun to look at with a child.
Well, it was September 8th, 2001 that you opened the first National Book Festival, and now you're returning as an author. This was published in May, Spoken from the Heart. And I just want to read, get your reaction to one thing, because I know when you speak in the tent, you're going to be talking about 9/11. But you write that on Friday night in September 7th, 2001, we held a gala for the festival at the Library of Congress before the official day of author events. Dr. Billington, the Library of Congress, introduced me. As the back of the stage opened, I walked out, the crowd gasped, and I felt that this was my official debut as First Lady. Not quite 9 months after George took office, I was now doing what I loved, finding my place in the world of Washington and beyond.
That's right. I mean, when I looked back, when I wrote the book and looked back at it, I saw that leading up to September 11th, the book festival, and then on the morning of September 11th, which I'll be reading about in a minute, I was on the way to Capitol Hill to brief the Senate Committee on Early Childhood Education. So I think I was just sort of finding my way as First Lady right before that weekend before. We had just hosted the Mexican president, President Fox and Marta Fox, on September 6th for our first state dinner. When I left for the Capitol that morning of September 11th, the White House grounds were covered with picnic tables. We were hosting the whole Congress and their families for the congressional picnic that night. So I think in many ways I was just finding my way and figuring out really what I wanted to do. And of course I knew what I wanted to work on was education and reading, because that had been my whole life. And that's what happened that weekend before September 11th.
Well, you also write quite extensively about 9/11. You also write about the Iraq War and Katrina. How personally did you feel as First Lady the politics and what was going on in the world? How did you feel?
Well, of course, I felt very personally the politics and the criticism about George. You know, everyone does that lives there, but I also knew that it was a fact of life. I knew when he ran for president that that's what happens to the American president. Remember, we'd been the child of a president ourselves, the children of a president. And we had been so distraught when President Bush, George's dad, was criticized so much in 1992 when he lost that election. And so we knew what we were getting into. I think you really know to expect that. And it's nothing new. We feel like it's new as we look around now and see the criticism of our current president. But if you visit the Lincoln Library in Springfield, Illinois, and see the terrible things that were written about Lincoln, then it was not 24-hour news, but it was pamphleteers, pamphlets that were published that were so critical and terrible about him. So it's just a fact of life, and it really is also a function of our democracy. that we can criticize our presidents, that we do have the freedom to say whatever we want to say. And so as much as I hated it when it was terrible things about George, I also knew that that's part of life in the United States, and really it's a part we should be grateful for.
At what point do you grow the skin thick enough to withstand some of the criticisms?
I think maybe we'd been growing that skin from when George's dad was vice president. But I also think, you know, I knew more than the critics. I mean, I lived with George. I knew what the threats were. I didn't know every one of them. He didn't, thank heavens, didn't tell me every one because he didn't want to add to my worry. But I felt like I knew a lot more about a lot of the issues than the people who were criticizing him did.
And in Spoken from the Heart, you write about those.
Yeah.
You're known as a pretty private person, only child,
Yeah.
but a couple of the things you write in the book are about some of the private trips that you took. And one of those private trips that wasn't on your schedule is a visit with Marianne Pearl in Paris.
That's right. I knew about Danny Pearl's kidnapping. He was a Wall Street Journal reporter, and he had been kidnapped. We all, I think, at the time probably assumed that he was dead, but we didn't know that for sure. And when I was in Paris, I knew Marianne Pearl lived there. She was pregnant with their first child. And so I made a call on her and had a chance to visit with her privately. Jenna, my daughter, was with me. We had a chance to talk to her and just bring some sort of encouragement and comfort to her. Shortly after that visit, we found out that Danny Pearl had been beheaded, and the really tragic and brutal way he was killed. And I've kept up with Marianne Pearl when I went to Paris last year, just a year ago, after George was president, for International Literacy Day at UNESCO. I invited Marianne Pearl out to lunch with the two spouses of the two current ambassadors, the bilateral ambassador to France from the United States and the wife of our ambassador to UNESCO, so they could meet Marianne Pearl. But in fact, she told me then, and 2 weeks later she became an American citizen. So she's a citizen of the United States now.
Again, with the privacy thing, you discuss this, you talk about some of your Yosemite trips or your hiking trips with your friends and how you were able to get away on those. Is it possible, and we've all seen the articles about the Carla Bruni book, The First Lady of France, and what Michelle Obama reportedly said, is it possible to have a private conversation in your capacity today?
Oh, it is, of course, absolutely. And who knows, she probably didn't say that at all. That was probably made up. I think Carla Bruni says she did not say that after all, but it is possible to have friendships and to have a very, very normal life. I know people don't believe that because you're living in such a magnificent mansion with every sort of help, including a pastry chef that you can imagine. But really, I knew that the White House could be a home, because George and I had stayed there with his mother and dad. And of course, Barbara Bush made it a home for all of her children and her grandchildren. And I knew that I could do that for Barbara and Jenna and for George too. And the other thing that George and I are very lucky about is that we have lots of longtime friends who came up and visited us and stayed with us.
Mrs. Bush, there's another Bush family book coming out in about 2 months.
That's right.
Have you read Decision Points?
I've read it, and it's very good. I think people are really going to like it. George's book publishes in November, Decision Points, and I think people will really like it. It's very George Bush. It's
Any suggestions
in
from
his
you?
voice, and not really. I mean, we were both writing our books at the same time. We shared researchers. We each had our own researcher who would go to the archives where everything is documented for instance, when I wrote about September 11th, to look at the Secret Service log of the timeline, to look at our advanced people's timeline, to look at the everything else that was on our schedule around that day, so I could write about it in a very straightforward and honest way. So we did share researchers. We did talk to each other about what we were writing. George did ask me to take a couple of stories out of my book that he thought were his stories, and they were.
And will we see them in Decision Points?
We'll see them in his book. They were stories of something that had happened to him that I was only reporting on secondhand in my book, but he wanted to include them in his book.
In your acknowledgments, you acknowledge and thank Andy Card and Josh Bolt. As First Lady, what was your relationship with the Chiefs of Staff?
George had two unbelievably great chiefs of staff, really, really fine men, Andy Card and Josh Bolton, and I was close to both of them. Both of them made an effort to have lunch with me once or twice a month.